Why don't we go ahead and get started? Regardless. All the thing to order. Advisory committee.
Laura.
Harry, on the
Can you hear Doug?
Barely.
I'll move it. Be doing a lot of talking, so I'm gonna
Great.
put it next to you.
Okay, let's start again. So I'm Doug Rader. I'm a member of the North Carolina Marine Fisheries Commission and just recently appointed chair of the Habitat and Water Quality Standing Advisory Committee. Note that Anna Shellam, who is also a commissioner, is here today and vice chair of this committee. So for us, welcome aboard to your ship. And I'm going to take a minute, if that's okay, having called this meeting to order, to go around the table just so for us, we understand who people are. If you could take a minute or two and tell us who you are. So just for instance, I'm I've been the chief ocean scientist for Environmental Defense Fund for 34 years. Have a long history of working in North Carolina with the Albemarle Pamlico study, including its original executive director, and a big interest in what happens here. I'm a marine ecologist by professional training, and we're just recently appointed to the commission. So we'll go around this way, I guess, and just say who you are and what you're interested in about habitat and or water quality. That'd be great.
I'm James Hall. I go by Stanley. I'll answer to both. Commercial fisherman, shrimp in particular. Just wanted to, like I told them a while ago, you hear people complain all the time, but just wanted to kind of join in and see, what I could do for my part. I see my part of it, and I understand everybody's part. So I just wanted to see what I could do, just be a part of it and see what I could do, how I could help them.
Great. Well, we're glad you're here.
I'm Mark Parrish. Held a commercial license for almost 45 years now. I don't commercial fish anymore. I'm having a business in town and all, but been resident of Carter County most of my life. And the reason I got involved in it, same as you, I wanted to make sure that you hear complaints and everything from both sides about habitat and everything. And one of the things I was monitored in marine studies at ECU, and one of the things back then was about non-point solution, the pollution and everything from agriculture and everything that was affecting fisheries back then. That's been 40 years ago. But it's been so much back and forth about the commercial and recreational sides of it. And, I've been a member of the PCA and also the Commercial Fishing Association. The main reason I'm here is to see where I can help out as far as from both sides of it, the recreational side as well as the commercial side. And plus to see, with the increasing population that we have here, we also have a lot of people who come from other states and they come to the place and don't know anything about what this environment and this fishery is all about. So I want to be able to lead these meetings and talk to people and say, this is what's going on. This is what we're trying to do on both sides of it, because, a lot of people up in arms right now about striped mullet and they don't know. Hopefully I can go back to the people at my church where I go to church in Salter Path and explain to them, calm down, we're trying to do something about it.
Well, thanks, Mark. So Anna, you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Bob, finish the committee members that are here, and then we'll hear from staff.
I'm Anna Shellam. I'm a newly appointed commissioner, and I own a company called Shellam Seafood. So I harvest wild shellfish every day for local chefs and chefs throughout the state. So I'm on the water every single day, and this habitat and its health and quality is of utmost importance to me. And I love being able to experience 24 hours of it every day. I live on my boat and I just am totally immersed in it. And I want to do what's right for our fisheries. And again, with the commercial and rec, blending them together. And just, I've learned so much already, and I'm excited to help things move forward in the right direction.
Thanks, Anna. Bob, it's good to see you again. Doug Rader here. It's been a long time. You want to introduce you,
Yeah,
take a moment and introduce yourself?
it has been a long time, Doug. I don't think either of us would recognize each other in a bar, would we? Uh,
I fear not.
but I am a retired faculty member from ECU. I wonder whether I taught Lamar back in the early '80s. It's we probably wouldn't recognize each other either from the early '80s. But I'm a coastal ecosystem ecologist. I've played a lot with water quality issues, and initially in the Neuse, and now in the Trent. Also, I'm a wetland ecologist, so I've done some work in the marshes, especially around Cedar Island. And I've been on this committee, I guess, several years now, and I'm really happy that we've got uh, sort of some non-academics more on this committee than in the past. So great.
Thanks, Bob. I'm glad to have you here.
Additional member who just joined us, Nathan Hall.
Okay. Oh, great. Nathan, you want to take a minute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I'm Nathan Hall. I'm at UNC's Institute of Marine Sciences there in Morehead City. Study water quality predominantly. I've done work in estuaries mostly. And so, yeah, that's my real focus. Lately, I've been involved in some efforts to understand light availability for seagrasses in our estuaries. And, yeah. Can y'all see me?
Thanks.
I can't see myself, so I don't know how this exactly works, but
Hey, Nathan,
can't-
this is Hope.
okay.
So you called in, so I'm not able to move you over to the panelist. So I'm just going to keep you unmuted on my end, and you just need to mute yourself on your end. But we won't be
Okay.
able to see you at all on the phone. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's okay. I just couldn't figure it out. And
Okay.
best I could. I'm calling in from Albany, New York from a conference.
Wow.
Oh. Grateful for you to take the time. That's fabulous. Ann, you want to introduce yourself and then go around the staff, please?
So I'm Ann Deaton. If I haven't met y'all, Habitat Enhancement section. And I am located in the Wilmington office, but work on coastwide habitat and water quality issues.
I'm Steve Poland. I'm the Fishery Management Section Chief. I'm located here in the Morehead City Headquarters office, and I'm over our Fishery Management Section, and that's the section that predominantly does most of our finfish sampling and develops draft fishery management plans for the Commission's approval.
I'm Debbie Manley, and I'm the admin for Fisheries Management. I'm Laura Kovansky, and I'm the MFC liaison with the division. So I work very closely with the commissioners, and I also work with the staff leads for each of these AC studies.
I'm not really part of the meeting.
That's okay.
I'm the biologist
Got it.
here, the CDO, the office right there. I'm here to discuss the striped mullet plan with you.
I told him to sit at the table. Thanks. Tina, you can too.
Yeah.
I feel included.
Introduce yourself, Tina.
My name is Tina Moore. I'm 70. Please contact us anytime if you. Website, look at it, check it.
Thanks, Tina. Really appreciate it. Okay, let's move on to the agenda if that's okay. And actually, I don't know, you have it in front of you now. And So without objection, we'll adopt the agenda by consensus and just move that through. That's okay? And hearing no objection, the agenda is adopted. Okay, we also have the minutes for approval from the March the 16th meeting. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at those if you are invested. And I would entertain a motion for approval of those minutes. So moved. Is there a second? Second by Anna. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. The minutes from the March 16th meeting are adopted. So moving down then on the agenda to an update from the Marine Fisheries Commission from Laura.
So. Second. First, I want to say thank you for coming tonight. For everyone who's here, this commission, or excuse me, this committee hasn't met for a while. And so I'm going to be giving you sort of the updates from the last two commission meetings primarily, but I do want to update you a little bit on the CHIP item, which is the last item that this committee reviewed. And I will get commission and committee mixed up probably a little bit more. First, there are a couple of things I want to update you on. First, we have these microphones. They are just on, so keep that in mind if you have any side conversations. As we've seen, they're apparently not that sensitive, so no worries. But they are on all the time, just so you're aware. And the meetings are streamed on YouTube for the public, so that's access for anyone who wants to meeting. We do have new commissioners, as Doug and Anna introduced themselves. They are two new commissioners. We also have two additional new commissioners. That's Donald Huggins and Sarah Gardner. And Commissioner Huggins, Doug and Anna were both at the August meeting. And Sarah Gardner was actually appointed at the same time, but she was out of town for that meeting. So she was sworn in last week at the prior to the Finfish meeting that occurred. So in November, we will have a full complement of commissioners. And the other item I wanted to talk about is the AC solicitation period. So every fall, beginning about September 15th, we open up the advisory committee solicitation period to request applicants to serve on all 5 of the advisory committees. So that period is open. It closes November 1st. So that's coming up quickly. And we will be reviewing those. And then the chairman appoints all of the AC membership seats. So if you currently serve on an AC and you would like to, if your term expires at the end of this year and you would like to continue serving, then we just need to hear from you about that. And then we'll need you to submit an application to continue serving. And if you have a previous application, I can certainly send that to you and you can review it and we can just use that one if it's acceptable. But we will, you can send that to me anytime. We will be reaching out to all the members to check with you to see if there's interest in continuing.
Question, Laura?
Yes.
Is there the prescriptions on membership for standing advisory committees like this one in terms of number of members or minimum or maxima or?
Yes, so there are 11 members possible, and it is up to the commission chair how many he appoints every year. One of the primary focuses of Chairman Bizzle's appointment is typically to try to make sure that he balances the committees. So a lot of our applicants tend to be either recreational or commercial. And so when he reviews those, he tries to make sure that he is balanced in his appointments to the commission, to the committees. We do get some amount of interest from the scientific community or NGOs, things like that. And they are
Got the
Was
list
it
of the
relevant?
people, so we do have 2 openings because.
Yeah,
of-
I was trying to,
So we will have 2 openings. The chair does not have to fill those, but those are available. And membership is anyone who's interested, basically, is a North Carolina citizen.
I was trying to decide, given the timing of the holidays and appointments, whether we needed to put our heads together and recruit additional new
Yeah.
members.
If you know someone, please, yes, recruit. We have tried to reach out. We've done social media posts and other things to try to expand our base for these committees. And we were successful last year. We had, I think the year in 2019, we had, I believe, no, 2020, we had about 11 applicants. Last year, we had over 30. So our outreach seems to have made an impact, and we're hoping to continue to grow that applicant base. Yeah.
So if you have friends who would like, who are excited about what we might do,
Absolutely. If you have friends, let them know. They can call me. I'll help them. Okay, so I'm going to move down into the commission activities. I'm going to go through this basically by management plan, just because that's sort of the way that we walk through these commission meetings as well. But if you have any questions, you're free to ask me. Once I am finished, Steve Poland is going to go through more detail on each of these FMPs. So he actually will have a lot more detail. I'm going to just cover the commission action for this part. Okay. So I'm going to read a statement about the CHIP, but I do want to point out, especially for this group, that Ann Deaton is the master of all things CHIP. And so if you have questions more than I have, she absolutely can answer those. And I encourage you to, if you're interested, to ask her. She's a great resource for that. And those of you on the phone as well. Okay. So the final, the Coastal Habitat Protection Plan was taken up at the November 2021 meeting. And that plan is a department plan that looks to address habitat and water quality issues across the coastal region. Because of its breadth, it's reviewed and approved by 3 DEQ commissions. So it's approved by the MFC. It's also reviewed and approved by the CRC and the EMC. So that's the Environmental Management Commission, the Coastal Resources Commission, and the Marine Fisheries Commission, all 3 committees. And that's a big deal because that plan, and you may hear staff say this a lot, we are a fisheries agency. So when it comes to sedimentation because of things that happen on land, the commission has no authority to impact those things, but the Coastal Resource Commission may. So by bringing in all 3 of those commissions, the scope of what can be accomplished with that plan is much broader and hopefully much more effective. So I just wanted to point that out. So the CHIP is currently being implemented. There were a number of management items that were implemented. The plan was passed with all of the recommendations from the CHIP steering committee, with the addition of the plan for the public-private partnership, which was approved and agreed with by all of the commissions. So Ann has been meeting with various NGOs and academics and all kinds of people to work towards getting that plan implemented. And again, she's a great person to ask. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask her. And I can run through and we can stop. This is pretty informal. So if anybody has questions as I go, please feel free to stop me. All right. So river herring. So last May, or this past May, the commission approved the, I said that last night too. In August, the commission approved the river herring FMP as an information update. And this means that there's no change in management. And the reason that the division recommended this action in this way is because the Atlantic States Marine Fishery Commission is currently undertaking a stock assessment for river herring. So the decision was that we would wait until that stock assessment was complete until reviewing state management. For southern flounder, the commission gave final approval on the southern flounder FMP amendment 3. That was back in May. And that plan is currently being implemented. If you are fishermen, you know about the flounder probably. And while that has been very controversial, we are seeing what looks like improvement in that stock. So we are heartened by that. And we, even though it's been a tough pill to swallow, we are seeing, at least anecdotally and in our data, some improvements in that stock. So that's good. Striped mullet. So during the May meeting, the commission were presented with the stock assessment report on striped mullet, and the next steps were the scoping period. So that has now taken place, and the scoping periods are when the division basically goes out to the public before we begin developing the FMP to talk to the public about management strategies for that plan. Steve can give you more of a specific update, but at the November meeting, the commission will hear the outcome of that scoping period, and they will also be reviewing and voting on approval of the goal and objectives for that FMP. And that basically marks the start of the development of the amendment. For striped bass, the commission selected their preferred management measures for the estuarine striped bass Fishery Management Amendment 2. And that was back in, I believe, May. And the gillnet issue in the CSMA has largely dominated the conversation around that plan. However, you'll hear from Steve, and you'll also at the November meeting, the commission will be reviewing not only the gillnet issue, but also the other management that's included in that plan. And that impacts all 4 of the stocks. The tarpon noose and the Albemarle Roanoke Sound stock. And so there, in August, that plan came to the commission for final approval of the preferred management options. However, because we had 4 new commissioners, basically the commission determined to table it until November, and that was to give the new commissioners time to get caught up in the issue. For spotted sea trout, the stock assessment presentation is going to be coming to the November meeting. So we'll get the results of the stock assessment, and that will. The stock assessments, all of our stock assessments go through a peer review process. So at the commission meeting in November, the commission's going to hear about the stock assessment results, also the outcome of that peer review, and we are also going to be presenting additional data on the spotted sea trout fishery in general. And there were a couple of sort of non-FMP items that the commission worked on or brought forth over the August meeting and the May meeting. So in May, the commission received an update on the blue catfish in Albemarle Sound. And that has, blue catfish are invasive in that system, and they have recently gotten a lot of attention from both scientists and also from the public, from commercial and recreational fishermen. And Virginia is actually ahead of us in the invasion. So they have actually a number of studies that they've done in Virginia waters that we are looking at and then trying to move forward in terms of assessing the impact of those. The commission also requested that the division draft a letter to the South Atlantic Council addressing the dolphin bag limit issue. So the South Atlantic Council, the division sits on that council as the representative, one of the representatives of North Carolina. And Commissioner Roller is also a representative from North Carolina on that council. He and our representative both agreed that the idea of a further bag limit on dolphin was probably not in the best interest of North Carolina fishermen and nor the stock. And they are going to be drafting a letter from the division stating that, and that's going to be submitted to the South Atlantic Council in December. Yes.
Did they include a men's size on that yet? Because I know North Carolina has no minimum reel size on it, whereas most every other state on the East Coast does.
I can answer that. No, there's no minimum size limit in place for North Carolina. It's actually, it's North Carolina and North, that management unit extends from Florida to Maine. So it's the 3 states south of us that have the minimum size. That has been discussed as a potential action item and a future amendment. But right now there's not a action in an amendment to implement the size limit here. And
I mean, you know, you're decimating the population when you're taking undersize. And I mean, the population has fell off tremendously in the past 4 to 5 years. Florida went to a 20-inch limit for that reason. So did Georgia and now South Carolina. We have from the Dolphin Advisory Commissions down there. That's the reason why I was wondering why we haven't adopted it. Because north of here, the season is very limited. Here, you know, you can catch dolphin here about 12 months out of the year. And that's why I was, you know, one of the reasons I'm here, because you have habitat, because this is one of the, you know, spawning grounds for them on right here.
I can speak a little bit to that because the council did, because I used to sit on the South Atlantic Council for us, and I was involved with a lot of that discussion on the most recent amendment. The council did receive pretty comprehensive data review by National Marine Fisheries Service characterizing the fishery and the change in the movement and distribution patterns of dolphin. What the data showed, mostly tagging data, and then long line reports, is that it does seem that the stock may be shifting north, and we're actually seeing higher catches in those mid-Atlantic and New England states now than in the past. Part of the history of why North Carolina and the states north of us didn't implement the minimum size limit. There was not a lot at that time, there was not a lot of fish in the catch here in North Carolina North that fell below that minimum size limit. And then there were also questions and concerns about the discard mortality in that fishery. It was assumed that discard mortality was fairly high. Since then, there has been some work done to characterize dead discards in that fishery. It did show that discards were, you know, moderately high. And since then, too, there's been some work done on looking at maturity of dolphin fish to refine what that size of maturity is. And it does seem like at 20 inches, most dolphin fish are mature, but that was kind of what factored into that decision back in the day. But I think, you know, all that is certainly on the table for discussion in, you know, future amendments at the council.
If you would allow it to expand on that, I mean, it seems to me that we're going to run into similar issues again and again, increasingly so, as things shift, waters warm and species move north, which is definitely actively underway on the East Coast. And I guess I would begin the discussion among us of thinking about whether and how there are not necessarily species by species, but more general engagements that we might want to consider about making sure that those kinds of shifts in spawning and nursery areas and habitats supporting them, those life histories, are adequately addressed in changing FMPs. And I personally believe that that's true across a number of these. So why don't we chew on that a bit and think about ways to get into it. Thank you.
Meeting, so thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And just one last final item at the August meeting, Commissioner Roller brought up the false albacore issue. And this was regarding sort of general concern over an unregulated fish that may or may not be becoming more popular with the recreational crowd and also commercial crowd. So the division actually in 2017 prepared a white paper on false albacore, looking at the same issue. And the commission requested that we update that white paper and bring it back to them with potential framing for what potential management actions in the future could look like, might be effective. So that's probably looking at sort of the February, May meeting for that to come back to the commission. And finally, the November meeting, which you are all welcome to attend, is going to be occurring November 16th through the 18th. And that is in Emerald Isle at the Islander Hotel.
Thanks, Laura. So the next item on the agenda is an planning overview of 2023 Annual Advisory Committee meeting. So we just let's go right into that.
So in front of you, you should have a copy of this calendar document. Are the Marine Fishery Commission 2023 annual calendars. This has, there's a color code down here, and then we also have listed the meeting dates on the bottom left-hand corner. This has the Marine Fishery Commission business meeting dates, and it also has the advisory committee meetings scheduled. This is a pretty standard schedule for all of the meetings. They're all typically held around the same time each year. And for the advisory committee meetings, typically what has happened in the recent past, and as you know, because this committee has not met this year, some of you who are new have not met at all. The committees don't meet unless there is an issue that is sent to them by the commission. So I became the liaison in about 3 years ago, and since that time, I've heard a lot of comment and concern about committee members not feeling prepared effectively to make sort of the big decisions that they're being asked to make without additional input. And so what we have proposed basically is to go ahead, schedule these meetings, and then have you all meet whether or not there's an issue for you to address. So if there's an action item or not. And to basically give you an opportunity to get an update on the commission meeting that happened, and also to update you on other things that are going on at the division, and certainly with this group, update you on CHIP items specifically, and other habitat specific items. So I have initially planned for an alternating hybrid, well, they will all technically be hybrid, but basically an alternating virtual meeting and then in person. So in January, we will have new committee members. And the plan would be to have a virtual meeting where we sit down and just introduce, do a bit of an orientation for the new members. And then we have a stock assessment presentation to bring to you, because we are going to be hearing a lot of stock assessments soon. So it's an opportunity for you to hear from one of our stock assessment scientists on how we do stock assessments, and also if you have any specific questions to ask those. But for that meeting, that would be it. There's no action item planned at this time. And in fact, I think I don't know if we have any action items specifically planned for this committee this year, unless something comes up. So looking ahead to the future, we don't have anything immediately. So plan would be January, to meet virtually. In April, we'd meet in person. In October, we'd meet, in July, we'd meet virtually, and then next October, we would meet in person. And I'm sort of looking for feedback on your thoughts on meeting frequency and if you know, the virtual versus person, if that works for you. And certainly this sort of balances our staff availability with wanting to make sure that you have time in person, basically. So it balances that need for us. Yeah. So I'm looking for feedback.
I have a reaction, but maybe perhaps other committee members first. Gentlemen?
Will we be getting, some packages ahead of time so we could be able to prepare and
Yes.
get our information, do our research and everything?
Yeah.
Okay. I have no problem with meeting either way. I mean, I live close by, so
Mhm.
either one.
And I will point out, so when we were under the state of emergency for COVID, we did not have to have a listening station for our virtual meetings. However, now that is no longer in place, we are required by the open meeting laws to provide a listening station. So if anyone wants to be in person, we will have a place for you to come, even if most people are virtual. So it's just a requirement. It just won't be as set up in the same way. Just so you know.
Any further thoughts?
Sir?
Do you have any further thoughts, Doc? Okay. So I think this looks great for now, and we should take time in January with the new committee members together to think through the role of this standing advisory committee and make sure that the meeting schedule links back to that. What do we most want to do? If we are acting as a sounding board to staff on fishery management plans as they are completed and coming to us for input back to the commission, then that's one important role. But others might be getting, among other things, getting ahead of that and earlier in the FMP process schedule to be able to think ahead about the habitat and water quality issues that might be involved in those species, but also the habitats that they use during their life history and the degree to which the CHIP and other state and federal programs that are being developed to help ameliorate those threats are actually achieving that end. And that there are some really interesting federal programs that have somewhat more teeth, I think, than some of the state programs do right now that we can coordinate with to think that through. So I guess I'm thinking that we should put our heads together, including with newly appointed members in January, and really think through the role of this advisory committee. And I would like to consult with staff about getting ahead of key priority issues that cut across species and across habitats as they make sense to prioritize relative to the overall schedule. In other words, if we looked at the fishery management plan schedule and other things that are happening related to the CHIP and our fellow commissions and other things, then are there places that we could take a leadership role in getting ahead of the curve on either species or habitats? I know that's general and vague, and that's on purpose. I guess I'm just challenging you that perhaps when we get back together virtually in January, we can be thinking about what we think is the most important thing that this standing advisory committee ought to be doing in terms of advising this commission to interact with the other two commissions within North Carolina and then the regional bodies in the South Atlantic, Mid-Atlantic, and the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, also charged on protecting habitats for some of the same species. Is that clear what I'm hoping we can do? And I don't have the wisdom today to propose something, and we need more time. I need more time to think through the schedule with, well, we have to obviously make sure that these issues are adequately concerned relative to the species that are being considered in the FMPs, and there's an opportunity to do more than that. That's what I'm suggesting.
And Doug, in all of the fishery management plans, there's usually habitat water quality research needs. And we have talked about having a little bit better, putting together a document that connects all of those, all the fishery management plans that have the habitat water quality actions and, and going back to that, keeping it on the radar. And so maybe, before,
That sounds
if
lovely.
you want to, we could compile that and bring that to to this group at some point. So you could
Well,
review that
what would
and
really be,
see there's common.
what would really be useful, and I'm going to show some of my ignorance here. I mean, I know some of these species intimately and not others. And so I don't think I could personally map out where I think the habitat water quality issues or priorities might be across the board. And in terms of adding them up to identify hotspots, if you will, in time or space of where issues are important for potential input from the Marine Fisheries Commission to their brother and sister commissions for the state of North Carolina. I don't think I could do that right now, and I would really appreciate your help, Ann, in thinking through how we don't impair your existing understaffed programs to be able to clarify what we most need to do. So
We can definitely work on that.
that's perfect. Thank you.
Just more effective action items in each meeting, for sure, instead of
Yeah.
going back over the same, see what comes. Smart.
But I've been a lot of times, well, for me, striped mullet's a great example. I don't have a clue whether there are habitat or water quality issues that are affecting one or more life history stages of striped mullet, in addition to fisher impacts. And I should know that, and I don't.
Well, probably the three of us are out in the water a lot and stuff like that. And the issues are pretty common among the whole region. I mean, the seagrass loss is directly affected, a lot of things that's going on here. And, and that's one reason why I'm here, because, in my lifetime, I've seen a lot of things change. One part I've been overfishing, but the water quality and habitat loss has been a major factor across the board. And, looking back at the minutes from the earlier meeting and everything, you addressed one right straight out in front there was agriculture. We can't do anything about it, but it's affecting our habitat and water quality.
But we actually can. So it's not a regulatory action that the commission on which Anna and I sit, but we have the capacity to make a recommendation directly to the EMC or to the CRC, or for that matter, outside the CHIP universe, to the governor or even to other standing North Carolina institutions or others. But on the partnership front, there's tremendous amounts of work that can be done. I mean, I was personally involved in building the nutrient actually trading program in the Tarapamlico Basin, just for instance. And so I think there's a lot of things that could be done if we can really dig in to the details of some of these issues and really look for opportunities, not to point fingers at people, but to solve problems.
That's fine. Are we, my question, are we following agendas of the commission, or are we advising to get the agenda of the commission?
Well, again, I'm just your chair, and the committee gets to decide. We're an advisory committee. The commission and its chair is the one that actually, at the end of the day, will decide what its own agenda is, but we can sure advise them. And so that's our job, in fact. If we are not advising the commission on what we believe they ought to be doing, then I don't think we're doing our job. So yes, we're in a position, we should be receiving the best advice of the staff in terms of the priorities they bring to us. And they're on a really tight schedule to get all this fishery management planning done. And that's not the only job that the commission has, to work with the other two commissions to design and implement and continually improve the Coast Habitat Protection Plan. That's a legal duty of the commission. So it's our job to advise the commission on that.
But what I'm asking is are they telling us the subject that we need to concern ourselves with, or are we telling them
Both is
To give and
I,
take.
I think it should be both, but
It is both. So they send things to you for review, but as an advisory committee, if there are, topics that come up from stakeholders or anything, you, as an advisory committee, can certainly bring that up and then decide if you want it to be brought to the attention of the commission. So that's absolutely your role.
we will be reporting on your behalf.
Yeah, well, that's it.
So-
When you were saying something a minute ago, we we're talking about, they may not have meetings or anything like, there's always something.
Absolutely. And that's why, I think that there's been a lot of changes, and, some of it is staffing, issues, but now with the, hybrid meeting process with virtual possibilities, it's much more realistic for us to make sure that these groups get together when there's not a specific action item on. Because I think when there is a specific action item, hopefully when you come to that table to discuss it, you have built your knowledge base and your information, and you have knowledge of what's coming in front of you. So you've got time to prepare before you sit down for that conversation.
And there are realistic resource limitations on what we can do and staff can do. And so I think it's incumbent on us put these things together in a way that allows us to focus on things that we think are most important and that the staff and the commission come to agree are the most important. But at this stage, I think it's open. We have the opportunity to build our own priorities and propose those. I would prefer to work with staff to do that just because they understand things I don't personally about what the opportunities might look like and what the needs are for the coming year. And there's no reason that we can't work together to agree on what those priorities are, and then take some of that load ourselves. I'm certainly personally.
It's just like a scheduling issue. So you could have an AC meeting coming up that has 3 action items from the MFC. So that might not be a good one
Right.
to add on an additional, so you can do your timing there because you guys don't want to stay here till 10 o'clock at night, right? But on those lighter meetings, would be the best time to bring those
Well,
on the agenda. And
so the virtual meeting in January, we're not anticipating an action item
That's right.
anyway. And so if we were going to try to re-energize ourselves and decide what it is, that we want to contribute, we can certainly come out of that meeting with a set of recommendations that then the Marine Fisheries Commission could review and give us feedback on our own advice. And we could take that forward as building a plan. For that matter, I would personally have a better understanding of what the flow is going to be for the responses to those plans as they come, so that we can schedule the additional effort that we want to put in. But again, I think that's something that we should talk about in January. Just be thinking about it, and we'll try to have that on the agenda. Any other comments by my committee members on this point? If there aren't any, then let's turn to management plan updates.
Right, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'm not Corinne Thor, just giving these updates the last 4 AC meetings, but she has taken some well-deserved leave, so I'm stepping in for her. I've already introduced myself, Steve Poland, and tonight I'm going to give an update on the items to where we're at with certain implementation of FMPs and kind of what's on the horizon. FMP development. So I'll start with Southern Flounder. A lot of people very interested in the Southern Flounder fishery and hearing update season. So Amendment 3 was adopted back in May. Laura went over that briefly earlier, and that management has been implemented. So the 2022 season was based on and the recreational season was open at 1 fish bag limit for the month of September. We don't have estimates yet for that recreational fishery, recreational catch estimates, or collected through a program called the Marine Recreational Information Program. It's a mail survey and a at dock survey. One component of that collects effort, other component that collects information on the catch, and there's two data streams are put together to generate recreational estimates of catch. So those typically lag about 45 days after the 2-month period. So we won't expect to have estimates of recreational catch until the beginning of 2023. So there were many staff involved in the process of getting Amendment 3 developed and implemented. The fishery management staff, licensed assistant staff, protected resource staff, and Marine Patrol. And a lot of them were on the water during the 2022 season. And we did learn a lot from that. What we have heard from fishermen, both on the commercial side and the recreational side, is that were a lot of flounder in the water, and it did seem like people were running into larger fish, which is good to hear, and it indicates that we're probably heading in the right direction. Some of our fishery independent sampling is starting to confirm that. We're starting to see larger catches and some of our adults from the seas, as well as starting to slowly see an expansion of age classes at fisheries. So, with that, I'll pause real quick in case there's any questions on flounder.
Steve, is there anything regional to report about the trends or patterns that you just described, meaning in South Carolina and Georgia?
No, I don't have a report from the other states. I will say that we are getting the states together probably early 2024 to start on the conversations for an update to that assessment. So, real quick for those who might not be aware or haven't been following throughout the whole process, southern flounder were assessed at a regional scale. So North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. So all southern flounder in the South Atlantic region, greater South Atlantic region, are considered one stock. So the needed reductions to rebuild that stock applied to all the states, but it's up to all the states to implement management as they saw fit. So we received a lot of push from the public and from the commission to get that assessment updated as soon as possible. So we're really waiting on other states to have their management in place and provide us that data. So short answer to your question is no, we don't have any indication yet, but we do plan to have an assessment update, hopefully finished by the end of 2020. Questions on flounder?
Bob or Nathan, you guys feel free to jump in if you have any questions as Steve goes through this.
I can tell you that implementing the smaller bar size on the TEDs is, I mean, from my point, it's probably not good, but from the sustaining the stock point, it's done excellent. I mean, if you have over a 4-day trip, if you have 2 flounder, over 14 inches, you've had a good flounder trip. But narrowing the bars down to 2 inches, I don't think many of them go out to BRDs, but I know the turtle shooter shoots them out. And I mean, it's cut that back to, 2 years ago when we were using 4-inch bars, you'd have 3 or 4 flounder a drag, for a 2-hour drag. And now if you get, 1 a trip, you've done good. Cause my wife loves flounder and I don't get to bring her nothing. But that, I mean, that's just saying it.
Yeah.
That is working. I mean,
Okay.
it works real well. So, I mean, that's a feather in whoever's cap, I mean, and it's okay with us. We hate fish and it cuts out a lot of fish too. I mean, we get some juvenile fish, of course, but we're not getting those big blues and stuff like that anymore. So it helps us from my perspective. Most of the guys I know, we hate fish. I mean, so.
I appreciate that. I hadn't heard that feedback.
Well, it does. I mean, of course, there's a lot of guys, ill about it and stuff, but, it's working. It's doing what it's supposed to do. And that's what I'm glad to see.
I'm not going to comment on how ill people are about it.
Well, you know,
Glad we're away from flounder.
if any of my constituents are listening publicly, they'll kill me tomorrow, but it was working.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions on flounder? So I'll jump into the 2022-2027 FMP schedule. Commission was presented the draft schedule at its August meeting, and the DEQ secretary approved that schedule. So for the 2022-2023 species in review, so the ones that are open right now, are currently river herring, hard clam and oyster, estuarine striped bass, spotted sea trout, and striped mullet. And additionally, in 2023, the division plans to update the blue crab stock assessment as laid out in Amendment 3, adaptive management. And I'll jump to blue crab real quick. The blue crab stock assessment update. It'll include data through 2022. The terminal year of the last assessment was 2016. And the results of that assessment indicated that the stock was overfished and overfishing was occurring. So this update with data through 2022 will add 6 years of additional data to that assessment. But only 2 to 3 years will actually include management put in place after Amendment 3 to address stock status. So it's kind of, right at the cusp of, really evaluating the management in that plan. There's a rule of thumb, typically like to wait, at least 3 years before reassessing a stock after management is put in place. But just given what we've heard from fishermen and what we've seen in a lot of our fishery independent indices, the blue crab abundance is probably not trending in the right direction. So the division felt like it was prudent to move that assessment up the schedule. In addition to the assessment update, the division is currently reviewing list of approved diamondback terrapin bycatch reduction devices or birds. Gear testing began last year in 2021 on a modified funnel design, which was proposed by North Carolina Crabbers, I think in the southern part of the state. And the division is reviewing results of that study, and the Shellfish Crustacean AC will receive that review in our update, hopefully in early 2023. And that's part of that plan, adaptive management and, for blue crab and diamondback terrapins is to periodically review new devices and take that to the Shellfish Crustacean AC before it goes to the commission. So are there any questions on that or move on? Good, because I'm not a blue crab expert. All right, switching our focus back to the FMP schedule. So as Laura noted, no management changes were deemed necessary for river herring. So therefore, at the August Marine Fisheries Commission meeting, the commission voted to adopt the 2022 annual FMP update for river herring as an information update to the fishery management plan. And this serves as a 5-year review for that FMP. Questions on river herring?
So it's still closed.
Yes, still closed. The assessment is coming, and I think results of that assessment will be available in 23, 2024, early 2024. Yeah. No questions, moving on. Hard clam and oyster plans are undergoing data review of current management, and hopefully you'll hear more about that late 2023. Commissioner Shellham, we talked about before the meeting started, but the division decided to go ahead and open up that plan, and for this first year do a deep dive into the available data for oyster with a focus on our culture planning program. and looking at that to see if, the management scheme, may be developed from that. So we felt like we were gonna take that, or we should take that time and really do a deep dive in that. We started to bring stuff to the ACs and to the commission, for action on that.
Anything novel on habitat or water quality in that plan that ought to come through this committee? Any different trends and closures or temporary closures or?
Let Ann speak
I
first.
mean, the closures are just, they've been holding pretty well
Mhm.
because they have this temporary
Right.
strategy. So, but what they have seen is that the temporary areas are closing more frequently, or they stay closed for longer periods of rain. There is a big push to create watershed restoration plans, which is a tool, where you can address, you do modeling to assess all the issues in a watershed level, and then basically come up with projects to reduce your runoff, very runoff oriented. And the legislature gave money to do one in Newport River watershed, which is a very traditional shellfish harvest area. And they've got some really new techniques, makes it, really pinpoint things. So there's some progress on maybe how to deal with it. But I don't think I've heard a lot of trends on like any one water quality parameter getting significantly worse or better. I did hear Troy Alpin tell me the other day that there was research at UNCW that found that there were a lot more heavy metals and toxins in the upper portions of the tidal creeks, which we're not surprised about. And there is information coming out of a Cruffle study by Joel Fodry, who's on this AC, but not here tonight. They're supposed to look at sedimentation in tidal creeks and the effect on habitat, including shellfish. So that might be a good thing to hear about that ties into that FMP.
I guess I should have asked the same question about blue crab, and I'm not trying to drag you back, but
No,
I'm thinking about the history of ENA, SNA, and other special nursery protection in North Carolina, and whether there is any status and trends information, the recent status and trends information that we ought to be thinking about related to that FMP. Don't have to answer now, but
There was also another Cruffle study done that assessed our nursery areas. And was the PI.
maybe in January, some of that kind of information relative to the FMPs coming up is possible.
Completed?
yes.
It is, okay.
The report. But don't ask me to repeat it right now.
No.
It's long.
No. I mean, this may sound repetitive to you guys, but
No.
you see what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So as these FMPs come to us, you should expect that we're going to ask questions about the particular spawning in nursery and other habitat affinities of these species, and whether or not there are any productivity limits being imposed there, and if there are any patterns or trends in those imposition, those effects. So,
No, I mean, and all that's great feedback. Making notes on that. So, I mean, a lot of our shellfish FMPs tend to be, heavy habitat FMPs in the sense that,
Sure.
there's a lot of discussion on habitat. There just seems to be more of a direct connection there. Stock productivity.
just one last comment, and you mentioned the metals issue, and again, I'm out of date, but I remember that there was a fair amount of sediment metal concentration work done back in the
Oh.
80s and 90s, and it's coast-wide
Right.
in the shellfish
That was a
Bios-
EPA study.
bioassessment program. I just wonder if there's anything more recent from North Carolina about.
They haven't really increased the number of sites we have in North Carolina. It's not very many. They do
Right.
sampling. It's not every year, every 5 years or something, just to
Okay.
do sites.
We don't need to dive into that now, but just, I'm again interested in the way they relate. Thanks, Steve. What's next?
All right, so we'll jump into estuarine striped bass. So the advisory committees gave recommendations for estuarine striped bass amendment to March. And Laura covered what transpired with striped bass at the May and August commission meetings. I won't go back into that, but it is coming back to the commission at its November business meeting to consider adoption. So in the meantime, after continued stock concerns, mostly centered on the low juvenile abundance that we highlighted at the August meeting in our review update, the division undertook a stock assessment update for the Albemarle Roanoke stock striped bass. Division and WRC staff continue to work on the update, and due to an initial review of the assessment results, the director initially decided not to open the fall season in Albemarle Sound, but after continual review of those assessment results, the director has decided to open the recreational season for striped bass starting November 1st in Albemarle Sound. And that was hot off the press today. A peer review panel, before we leave striped bass, are there any questions?
A comment, sorry. So I think the committee should be aware that one of the sticking points in the estuarine striped bass amendment has to do with whether or not there's the potential for reestablishing spawning populations in the central and southern area. So in the Neuse, Tar Pamlico, and or Cape Fear system, and whether some of the higher numbers that we're seeing for a couple of years up in the headwaters, especially in the Tar Pamlico and Neuse, could jumpstart that or not. But I think in terms of where we're going, once we all get past estuarine striped bass, there's still a question, at least in my mind, about whether or not and what would be required to actually do that. And so I think it would behoove us to begin thinking about aligning up the experts with the staff that we need to be able to think about, for instance, whether flow adequacy in those rivers and habitat adequacy in the swamp forests in those rivers is adequate to be able to sustain that, given the dams and other alterations. And so I think there's a habitat driver that we ought to be on the hook for ultimately. Maybe not this time, but just sort of fair warning. And I will observe that the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council, way back when I actually chaired their Habitat and Environmental Protection Advisory Panel, put in place a policy related to the establishment of flows for managed species and their prey that gave access to federal actions and expenditures that affect that habitat adequacy, including river flows. So there is a policy adopted by the South Atlantic Council on river flows to help maintain fishery resources that is actionable in terms of federal investments and permits and other things. So that's just one example of those linkages between North Carolina and other things that we might think about. So long spiel, but.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Any other questions?
Questions?
All right. Moving on to spotted sea trout. The peer review panel agreed that the spotted sea trout stock assessment is the best available science and is appropriate to base management on. The assessment contains data through 2019, and the results indicate that the stock is not fish with biomass almost twice the target level. However, it is experiencing overfishing. A stock assessment overview will be presented to the Marine Fisheries Commission at its November meeting. Questions on speckled trout?
Seeing none.
All right. So move on to the striped mullet stock assessment, or striped mullet plan and the stock assessment. The assessment was presented to the Marine Fisheries Commission at its May business meeting. The assessment indicated that the stock is overfished and overfishing is occurring in the terminal year of 2019. Because of stock concerns, the DEQ secretary has determined it is in the long-term interest of the stock to develop temporary management through a fishery management plan supplement. The supplement will be in place if approved by the commission until Amendment 2 is adopted. Supplement presented to the commission at its upcoming November meeting. Also, at the November meeting, the Marine Fisheries Commission will be asked to approve the goal and objectives of Amendment 2 and review the public scoping period, which was held September 26th through October 7th. Scoping document was developed by staff to get conversation and seek input on management strategies to be developed in Amendment 2. Management strategies are simply the techniques used to achieve the goals of the plan. Proposed management strategies for Amendment 2 include sustainable harvest, recreational fisheries management, small mesh gill net management, addressing the stop net fishery, and migration corridors. The division reached out to stakeholders through an online questionnaire and held 3 in-person meetings, one of which was held as a hybrid online. It was our first hybrid open forum type meeting with a new audio setup, and we do appreciate the feedback received from those who participated, and we continue to try to provide ease of access to our diverse stakeholders during these invaluable meetings. So during these 3 scoping meetings, over 200 stakeholders participated throughout the 2 weeks. Comments mostly centered on concerns over the assessment results, regional management, year-specific management, year-round fishing needs, recreational fisheries, and concerns on overfishing finger mullet, or that life stage, typically referred to as finger mullet. And there was a lot of interest in stakeholders to be members of the F&P Advisory Committee, and look forward to speaking with those people more as the F&P process moves forward. And we do have Jeff Dobbs. He's one of our leads for striped mullet. Here tonight, give an overview of Amendment 2 and answer any questions and receive any feedback y'all may have.
Thanks, Steve. Steve said I'm Jeff Dobbs. So the main reason I'm here today is because I want some input from all of the ACs on management strategies that we're going to bring forward to the commission. So I know it's kind of hard to jump in and start giving me broad management strategy ideas, but you know, to me, the most pertinent strategy that was identified by the division pertaining to habitat would be the migration corridors, because that is the critical area for them to make their yearly spawning migration to the ocean. I figured that might be a point that y'all might have some input on. But the rest of we did have the 3 scoping meetings and 4 other AC meetings where we heard from folks that regional management is going to be really important because it's not a one-size-fits-all fishery. It's very distinct throughout the state. In the north, it's more of a bait fishery. Is a predominant market. Central area here, the rural market's really important. Down south, they sell a lot of meat to South Carolina and to the rest of North Carolina. We've heard that the fish tend to move. We know they move southward, but the larger fish tend to be in the southern part of the state later in the season. Heard a lot of support for adaptive management. You know, we heard repeatedly that once you take it away, we don't get it back. So they'd like to have some measure built into the plan where if the stock does improve, that we could have some relaxing of regulations. But we did hear that folks don't want that to be based on landings triggers, as was done in the previous mullet plans. They would prefer it to be based on biomass indicators that we have fishery independent alongside our SIMNet program or our shocking program or something, some hybrid of those.
Is feedback timely from those kinds of monitoring programs? I mean, how long after the fact?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, we have every year we put out our fishery management plan updates for each of our managed species. And we have information from our fishery independent programs that we use in those every year. So we already are updating the abundance estimates for all these species based on the programs that monitor them on a yearly basis. So it wouldn't be beyond what we're doing anyway. You know, it's something that we could implement fairly easily, I think.
Well, the fishery here is, a lot of it is resident, not necessarily migratory. I mean, migratory through the state and everything,
Right.
but, because we are in an estuarine environment here where they breed and spawn and everything. One thing I see a major concern, a lot of people I know concerned about it, like it's mentioned, the finger mullet. You've got a big commercial fishery and they're cast netting, but that's still hauling out truckloads of finger mullet a day. And they start in Delaware and come all the way and go all the way to Florida, following that migrant of the finger mullets, what we call the mullet run. And I've seen them where I live, tractor trailer sitting there every night waiting to load up loads and loads of, full tractor trailer loads every day. We, as commercial fishermen, we have to report our catches. They don't. They come, and when it runs out here, and when it moves on, they move with it. We have no records of what they're catching or what they're doing.
So I've not heard that
For the
before.
bait trade? I'm sorry, I was just curious, Nathan, is that for the bait trade? What is that?
Yes, bait trade.
Yes,
Okay, okay.
So,
it's a good question, Nathan. I had the same one.
so people are collecting these to sell as bait in other states.
Oh, yeah.
If they're gonna sell it,
Processing.
so they're not reporting them as catches and they're just.
Well, they say that, I've asked a couple people about it. Do they have commercial license and everything? And they said, issued a license to them. But like I said, most of the guys are from Pennsylvania and Delaware. When the mullet run starts in late, mid-August, they start and follow it all the way down the coast. They're usually here late August through September and have mostly just left.
They're looking for those smaller.
They're looking for the finger mullets, bait mullets.
Okay.
And take them alive?
But I can tell you, the Lowe's parking lot there in Cape Carteret, when they're here, there's a tractor trailer sitting there every night, brings new open coolers with ice. They load them on the trucks, head to the beach, and then cast net them, and then meet the truck back there the next day to load the tractor trailer up to leave.
Yeah, I wish Carter Witten was here, Colonel Witten was here, 'cause I know Jason's up, but I know Carter and I had a conversation about this a month or two. So I live down there near Cape Carteret, and it's mostly, there's a crowd that comes out of Delaware and another one out of Maryland that you typically see, and they go down there to the point and throw these large handmade cast nets.
Just so I understand, these commercial fishermen are licensed or not
Yes,
licensed?
they are licensed, so.
Licensed by the state of North Carolina.
They are, so, I know when this fishery, first started to occur, I think they were not licensed, and, I know Marine Patrol, had interactions with them, and now all are above board as far as having licenses, but as far as, landings actually, making it on the trip tickets, sure, because if it's the same operation, if they're not, landing these at the dealer, it's just part of the operation. I don't know legally what would require them to report them through a trip ticket. That is certainly something that we can get more information on.
That's very interesting to me. I haven't even heard that before, but yeah, I think there definitely needs to be some way to record these catches. If they're just transporting out of state, they might not be going out. So we might be missing that.
Chairman's prerogative, it's 20 minutes after 7. We had public comments scheduled for 10 minutes after 7, and I know it's flexible, but so I just wondered if there is anyone who wants to comment here, and if so, whether there's a time issue. You seem to be the only one, Lisa. Do you have anything? Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. I'm just making a point of making a statement. Just okay. We'll resume the agenda as stated.
I think this is the welcome one.
This is the only thing that's left besides your, but I'd love to
Here,
hear.
if anyone has any ideas, even non-habitat.
Well, I do have some habitat questions, and again, I expressed my ignorance earlier, and I don't want to take the committee's time to fill my own ignorance, but what do we know about the spawning areas and juvenile nursery affinities of striped mullet in North Carolina, and for that matter, regionally? So if they're moving from Pennsylvania or Delaware down to Florida, stock structure in that fishery and where the critical habitats would be to sustain those fish. I just don't know.
Okay, I'll start off with a brief life history, and then I'll move on to your next question, which was migration. Basically.
And this is
unit
the
stock.
5-cent version of
Yes,
this,
exactly.
and we'll come back later. I can educate myself in the committee. We will educate the committee, but for now.
We'll start with the spawning. They move out of the estuaries and spawn in the ocean. Typically, could be a few miles from shore. We're not really sure. We don't have good reports of spawning aggregations in the ocean, but we do know that they spawn in the ocean. As there are reports as far out as the continental shelf, but once they spawn, the onshore currents bring the larvae inshore, and then they begin to make their way into the pressure water areas of the estuarine systems and up into these really small creeks.
Primary nursery area
Yeah.
associated.
Yeah, so typically, I mean, they're really well distributed throughout the state, but they tend to be in these lower salinity waters. And then as they grow throughout the summer, they'll be inhabiting these mesohaline middle salinity areas. And then when they reach maturity, which is, can be a year to 2 years, typically most of them mature at 2 years. As the weather cools, people call them mullet blows, but you get these northeast blows that trigger them to make their spawning migration. So they'll move all the way from the tops of the Neuse and Pamlico rivers and all the river systems in the Albemarle and make a spawning migration all the way out to the ocean. That's typically completed by December or January. Once they're in the ocean, they'll complete that spawning behavior, and then they'll move back inshore. In terms of unit stock, we did conduct a tagging study in 2098 through 2001. And the results of that did show that there was very limited movement in the states. So these fish that we have here do seem to be resident fish. They do make a southern migration when they leave the inlets, but they're not moving like hundreds of miles south. They're moving a little bit south, spawning, and then the currents are generally moving from south to north, pushing the eggs back up, and then the onshore currents are bringing.
So the analogy of these guys following the fish has to do with the timing of
The timing of
the
that's correct.
finger mullet size.
So as it's cooling first, further, and we even see that even on the statewide scale. The fish start to be out making that spawning migration out of the Albemarle Sound and out of Oregon Inlet much sooner than down in Brunswick County and South Carolina border. Probably about a month different between the northern extreme and the southern extreme of the state.
So as far as we know, the habitat affinities are the same in terms of primary and secondary nursery habitats and estuaries generally, except that there's this question of the near coastal ocean, the surf zone, where the finger mullets seem to congregate in schools. I mean, I've seen.
So we do have two species. This management plan that we're talking about is for striped mullet. That's the larger, or the species that's larger here in North Carolina. The white mullet that we have are typically leaving our systems to go, they do make a longer migration, but the white mullet is what you see on the beach that's, somewhere in that 4 to 7 inch range making the migration. A striped mullet is typically not making a spawning migration at that size. That's still a juvenile size for them. So they would be staying in the estuaries and in the.
So how are these guys cast netting them then? I mean, they must be,
They're
they must be
probably
aggregated, right?
The finger mullet size going out to the ocean now, they're probably targeting mostly white. Assumption. And the striped mullet would be those larger fish, that the roe mullet or the top mullet. Right now, it would be a mixture of those two, and they're starting their pretty much in the thick of their spawning migration now.
Okay, great. That's perhaps in January, to get to the next item. If there are species specific or issues related to either mullet that you think this committee might want to prioritize, would you feel free to bring those back to us
Yeah, and
in January?
by that point, we'll have some feedback from the commission as well.
Yeah.
And probably have a direction that we're looking for the management plan. As of right now, we don't have any concrete plans for management strategies.
Right. So there was a question to the commission about other issues.
Yeah,
Bob?
I have a question. It's my recollection that the mullet are a major species in fish kills, especially up in the tidal creeks. Is that true, or?
They can be associated with fish kills, especially when you get these flows that push anoxic water out of tannic areas. So then they end up just trapped in these creeks and bays. But I wouldn't say that they're a major species. It's typically menhaden and other species that are more susceptible to the low oxygen.
Well, I mean,
Bob,
that
it's a
would be
good-
a
it's a good-
habitat. That would be a habitat issue that we could wrap our heads around, though, right? In terms of, I'd like to know a little more about, where they stand, relative to spot and croaker in fish kill stories.
That's a good question. So it seems like the suite of habitat issues has to do with overall primary and secondary nursery habitat integrity, and whether there are any trends in that for this and other species that use them. And then, as Bob suggested, in main stem estuarine water quality, including anoxic events that lead to fish kills. Or other things like that. So if staff has an opinion about those things, maybe you could, not right now, you could put some thought into it, and if there's anything that we want to dig into. Good idea, Bob.
And there is fish species information on fish kills that DWR collects, or whoever does the report, it goes to DWR and it's on their website. So we
My
could,
memory of these, and this is again more than 10 years old, it was mostly menhaden and with a spot and croaker and almost everything else mixed in at that
sometimes flounder.
sometimes.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong,
Jubilees.
but the species itself is a lot more hardy than what you're talking about, mullets and, menhaden. At least a little bit of salinity change in menhaden will railroad up there in a minute.
Yeah, they are a little more resilient to differences in salinity. They can inhabit all the way from full saline to full fresh water. They do have a little bit more of a low oxygen tolerance, and they also are highly mobile, so they tend to just leave. the
They're
oxygen
plankton feeding, right?
and worms and detritus and
And that's too.
So those main stem anoxia events can get everything. Hog chokers, some things that you think are completely resistant. I think Bob's pointed a good one, and I just don't know if there are patterns or trends. Most of the big reporting on that's been quite a while ago. So if there's any update on
I think we
stem-
can reach out to DWR and get some of the information, some species composition.
and for that matter, the prevalence, severity, and extent.
Yeah.
duration.
And,
Kills North
and,
Carolina.
and again, this is sort of one of you were talking earlier about cross-cutting habitat issues and for various management plans. So this would be one of it to sort of revisit where we are on the hypoxia and issues in terms of habitat. And
Yeah. Thanks for the advice on that, Bob. That's a good, important comment. Anything else, gents? Anything that we haven't answered that you think we could? 'Cause I don't feel qualified to ask, to give you any advice on fishery management for striped mullet.
No, I think this has been great.
I know. We'd love to hear it. Don't be shy if there are things that you, any of you would like for this committee to take up, and we can certainly look into that. So should we move on now to talk about, I'm sorry?
Oh, no, this is Nathan again. I just wanted to mention, I think you're right. We haven't really looked at the hypoxia issue in a while. And my sense is, I look at the data a lot. I haven't done any kind of formal analysis on it recently, but my sense is that things really haven't changed much. I don't think they've gotten any better. I don't think they've gotten really any worse either. Like I'm talking like the last 20 years. I really don't feel like there's been much change one way or another, especially in the news. That's where I look at the data all the time. My sense is generally that things aren't any better or worse there. Pamlico River, not so sure. I don't really keep track of that data.
I think a question to the water quality folks just about what they have in terms of stats and trends on hypoxic events in the Tar Pamlico and Neuse estuaries would be really interesting, I think, and useful to us. But there's
Okay. Well, I can tell you this.
not without doing a lot of it work. I'm sorry, Nathan, go ahead.
Oh, the hypoxic events, the bottom water in the Neuse River estuary during the summer, it's hypoxic every summer. And for most of the time, unless there's like a big wind event, it's hypoxic. I guess what would be an event is when that comes to the surface and kills fish. And that, those events are rare. But the hypoxia is there all summer. It's there. Unless there's been some kind of crazy wind event, it's hypoxic.
Nathan, wouldn't you say that Albemarle Sound hypoxia would be worse now because of the eutrophication?
Well, it's funny. I don't know. So the data I've seen, the sound itself is pretty well mixed. I don't think it's going to go hypoxic. The Chuan River, I think the upper parts of it go hypoxic, especially if there's any salinity at all up there. And this summer there was, because it was really a dry year. So I suspect there was some hypoxia up there. Maybe the mouth of the Roanoke, I'm not sure. I haven't seen that data. I haven't looked at it closely, but the Albemarle Sound itself is well mixed. I don't think you're going to see hypoxia.
Has any of this triggered any anaerobic algal blooms? And I haven't kept up with it because I used to be on Tar River Foundation years ago, but we had any major anaerobic algal blooms from the hypoxia?
Can't answer. Bob, you're an expert. Nathan?
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Did you get the question?
Have we had any major algal blooms this summer to be worried about? Is that what you're asking, or?
You mentioned the hypoxia and everything, and I know when I was on Tar River Pamlico Foundation years ago, we were studying the effects of the hypoxia coming into Pamlico Sound and triggering anaerobic algal blooms that was essentially causing major fish kills as well as loss of habitat.
And of course,
some of the hypoxia, bottom water hypoxia, is due to algal blooms, but there's so much organic matter in the sediments that consumes oxygen that you don't have to get a bloom to have hypoxia in our estuaries. You just have to have stratified water for long enough, and that bottom water goes hypoxic without any, you know, you don't have to have an algal bloom to have hypoxia. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to, yeah, there's not like a direct link all the time between the algal blooms and hypoxia. Sometimes you can get hypoxia without an algal bloom.
Well, what I'm saying, it was inversely proportionate. We found that, you know, the stratified water was causing algal blooms because, you know, lack of oxygen, the anaerobic algal blooms was directly, you know, corresponding to it.
Yeah, well, you can get all kinds, you get nutrient release from the water. Yeah. There's a feedback there where if you have hypoxia, you can get ammonia and phosphate released from the sediments that can fuel blooms. And yeah, that absolutely does happen.
And of course, a tremendous amount of money has been spent by the Albemarle-Pamlico National Estuary Program and all of their partners, looking at causes and effects of both algal blooms and deoxygenation in all of those waters. I guess my question is whether, on balance, what we know today suggests that there's anything more that could be done, or whether the CHIP now actually recommends anything different that we might bring and consider as we think about these priorities that we might want to engage with. So perhaps the staff could synthesize a short briefing on what is known about the status and trends in time and space of deoxygenation, algal blooms, and other types of deoxygenation more generally in North Carolina estuaries. I think that would be really, really useful. Lots of money was spent on controlling nutrient inputs in the Neuse and Tar-Pamlico and Chowan, for sure. It's actually just, you know, one quick observation. We treat Albemarle Sound as if it's always going to be an oligohaline system, and it wasn't and won't be. So whenever Roanoke Inlet or some other inlet ends up, the old fossil Roanoke Inlet ends up blowing, and that becomes a more mesohaline setting in at least the eastern part of Albemarle Sound, despite the flows from the Roanoke. Who knows what the salinity regime would be and what the nutrient limitation might be. And I think have to look into our crystal balls, but that would be likely to happen, at least while we're alive. I'd just be interested to know what the patterns and trends are high level, and whether there particularly any of the species that we're thinking about are disproportionately affected by those threats.
In all systems, or all systems that we have information.
Yeah, right, absolutely. And what we're looking for is guidance from staff on whether there is a priority there that this committee might consider. Okay, so the last thing on the agenda is other input from committee members on agenda items for the next meeting. We've sort of been doing this organically as we proceeded, but this is your chance to bring up other things that you really think might be important for us to begin being briefed on or thinking about working on.
Just as a reminder, the only thing right now that we have scheduled for January is the orientation for the committee members and also the presentation on the stock assessment. I do have quite a list now that I'm going to be reviewing with staff, and we'll be working on sort of.
Those are the things, as you know, that have come up ad hoc, and you should feel free to provide your own guidance. And
Absolutely.
if there are things that are dumb, just leave them off. If there are things that we have omitted, then feel free to add them. And but in January at our virtual meeting, we'll talk about it. And so if there are other things between now and then that come up in your mind that you would like to propose, make sure you get them to whom? To Ann, to Laura?
Ann, yep.
Can I add something, please?
Please do, Bob.
Last Wednesday was the Coastal Water Quality Summit that was developed around this partnership, private-public partnership associated with CHIP and water quality. And, there was the excitement of having this thing that was actually put together by DEQ and the Pew Foundation and Coastal Federation. Anne was very much involved with it. I don't want to put her on the spot this late in the tonight, but by January, there may be some outcomes, some initial outcomes from that effort that we might want to know about. So maybe Anne or somebody else could sort of summarize the status of that initiative. I think that would be useful.
I can definitely do that, Bob. There's going to be a lot of follow-up with the group that was there. There's plans to do follow-up survey and then see who still can participate, has the time, interest to participate, and then get that group together to start planning what they're going to work on more specifically. So we had some good ideas brought up at the summit, and yeah, I think that should probably just regularly, this would be a great group to just give updates on.
And in addition to that, if Bob doesn't mind, to bring to us a summary of interesting things happening in the habitat world that overlap with the mission of this committee. And I'm thinking particularly about APNEP and whether there's anything coming or going there, or similarly with ASMSC habitat programs or the Mid or South Atlantic Central Fish Habitat Management programs that might dovetail with the priority choices of this committee. That would be fabulous.
Great.
Are there other thoughts from committee members?
This
If-
is Nathan again. You're
Yep.
talking about things that are going on with APNEP, and it made me think about, Division of Water Resources is in charge of putting together the nutrient criteria development plans. That's nutrient criteria for all North Carolina surface waters. And one of the things that's going on now is adopting water clarity standards for estuaries, and with the idea that we want to save our seagrasses. So yeah, so that's going on, and so the idea right now is to adopt water clarity standards for seagrasses in low salinity and high salinity seagrass areas, and adopt the ones at Chesapeake Bay. There's a lot of research that went on in Chesapeake Bay to figure out how much light these different types of seagrass need. And so right now it looks like the plan is that those water clarity standards are going to be adopted. And so that was described in the CHIP as well. So you can read about it in the CHIP, but it looks like it's at least the Nutrient Criteria Development Plans Scientific Advisory Council is all in agreement that that's going to be adopted. We'll see how it actually plays out, but I think it looks good. So
And I think by January, Nathan, we may know, because you'll have had your SAC meeting. And I heard that the Water Quality Committee to the Environmental Management Commission is going to have Jesse Jarvis there going over, what we are in the process. So that may get pushed onto the EMC agenda maybe in
Good.
January.
Great. That's good to hear.
Just one other thing like that, and again, this is something I haven't been following, but I understand that the councils and commissions on the East Coast have been collaborating on a climate impacts assessment, looking at the degree to which stock structure and distribution and abundance changes and other things might be coming, and the kinds of resilience planning tools that might be available. I hate that word, but because people mean so many different things by it, but meaning what the future might hold in planning for that. Perhaps there's some, I don't know what the schedule is, but maybe there's a short report that you could bring us about what that and other
And Steve might be able to give you an update now because he was on the council back when they were.
I think it's too late,
Doing
but that's what I'm actually asking for is that those,
future.
this is the same thing, you know, is if you could bring us a landscape assessment of various institutional assessments and engagements that could potentially overlap with the mission of this commission, along with your advice on which of those things might be prudent for us to begin to engage with. That makes sense to the committee. Great. Anything else from staff or from members? Hearing nothing, I declare this meeting to be adjourned a few minutes early, which is always good. And I'm going to hang around for a little while if anybody wants to talk or otherwise, then we'll see you the next time in January virtually.
All right.
Thank you.
Everybody have
Thank you,
a good
Nathan.
evening.
Thanks, Nathan.
Y'all take care.
Thanks, Mr. Parker.
Dragons. Habitat down or? Yeah. Hey, the guys come out.
I log off.
Jason Rock and I.
Don't leave up there till.